Well, welcome, Keith. Thanks for being with us today, and thank you for your message on Sunday. It was really great just to hear the next part of our series on the good life. And there was a number of things in that, but just before I get to a few points that stood out for me, can I just ask you, what was it like for you to step into preparing that message? Because there's so much in it, and you know what you gave us was great, but I think we could have done a whole series just on that righteousness piece. Yeah. What was it like for you to grab the parts that you felt God was really wanting us to hear today?
Well, unlike some other times when I've preached and been given a topic where I thought, oh, okay, how do I get into that? This one had immediate resonance because it has been a major emphasis for me, and it's what actually helped me back to God many years ago, believing that Jesus actually knew what he was talking about, and that in practical terms, life will work best this way. So, and I've had ups and downs, but I've sought to actually try to live that out. Lots of forgiveness needed and doubling back and whatever, but the major values that I came to believe in, like as I mentioned, the Sermon on the Mount, I've found that this is, other than my direct relationship with God, this would be the most passionate part of my life, personally.
And so you mentioned values there, and values was a key thing in your message. And I remember one of the things you said was that the key value is actually putting God first. That's what leads to the good life. What does that look like practically for us? How would you describe that to somebody?
I think that's a lifelong journey that I'm still on, and still discovering little by little, with some setbacks now and then, but just to become more and more convinced that he is good and he is involved in this world, that he loves us deeply, and the more we communicate with him and get to know him, the richer our lives and the lives that we touch will be, and we will allow others to touch our lives more effectively. And that, I'll just give you an example. I mentioned I was brought up in the church, and prayer was always something that was boring, and I couldn't see the point of it, and whatever. Yeah. Gradually, just the idea of just saying hi to God and bringing him into the picture as often as possible during the day becomes something which is a more and more effective theme of everyday life. Now, that sounds almost super spiritual, and I tell you I struggle with that a lot, and sometimes after several days I come back and say, oh, sorry, I've left you out of this one too.
Good. So you're like most of us. That's good.
That's right. But that idea of, as I often say, the intimate, organic relationship with God through Jesus actually becomes a conscious recognition during each day that I'm not alone, and that even that short passage that I read in the final reading there, where it says basically he works everything together for good. Yeah. So I'm by nature a relatively anxious person, so I need that kind of calming security during each day.
There's an underlying trust in all this, isn't there? Just trusting Jesus with who he says he is and what he's done, and trusting him at his word.
Yes.
And I think that's coming through a lot in what we've been exploring.
Yes.
Just coming back to the values again, you mentioned that the values actually come out of our heart, with the heart being the centre of who we truly are. Is there some way you think that we could identify for ourselves what's going on in that place? How would we work out what our values really are? You know, we might say they're one thing, but in reality they could be something different.
Okay.
How do we work that out?
Well, I think that's a deep and relatively complicated subject, but there's a couple of heads up that I'd say about that. One is that the biblical principle, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Yep.
In other words, what I spend most time and energy on, that's basically where my heart is. I might want it to be in different places. Brief example, when I was in local church pastoral ministry, I would have told you that my family was more important than my ministry. But in actual fact, the way I prioritised when there was a choice led my children at one stage to believe that actually that's not true. If the phone rings when we're having dinner, you get up and answer it and go to do whatever. So what actually I was spending my time and my energy on was a good indicator as to what were the key values in my heart. And the second one is a fairly unusual one, but it's a very, if you want a quick swipe idea of what's going on inside you, when somebody says something to you or an option becomes open to you, what do you feel? Feelings are a really good example of what is deep. I'm not saying that we should trust our feelings as the best way to go forward.
Yeah.
I'm simply saying it's a good litmus test of what's going on inside your heart. So if you hear a person's voice, then you have a feeling with that, and that shows you your deeper attitude and relationship.
And I suppose in the mix of that, it's our thoughts too, the stuff we think about. And, you know, when you're left with nothing really going on, where does your mind naturally drift to?
Yes.
And I think the issue with that is people generally don't know what we're thinking. And so we can hide that, or we can actually tell them we're spending time on something that we're actually thinking about other things. Yeah, so there's some great things in there. Just want to finish with one more point. You made a couple of great points, and one of them was around hope, that we need to have hope to live effectively each day. Particularly in this environment that we find ourselves in, where there will be some people where anxiety is high and fear is high. What's the hope that you personally hang on to, the hope that's got you through some of the tough times in life, and the hope that you inferred is something that is actually eternal? What does that look like again in the practical for us?
Okay, so if I could just answer that at a couple of different levels. Say, with this coronavirus, my hope is, and I'm an optimist by nature, I recognise that, but I think I do take notice of reality. But my hope would be that we won't just snap back or even gradually ease back to exactly what we were before this, but that the key values that are worthwhile in life, the deeper values that I believe we are being caused to examine and look at the moment, like loving your neighbour and looking out for the people who are more vulnerable, to be kinder as a society. And I think that we've had good examples of the way in which even our government has said, hang on, there's people who are going to be badly hurt by this. We need... the economic is important, but we need to deal with some really important issues before we look at the economic outcome. We will address that. I love that kind of value system, so that at that level, I'm seeing that we can have a different, as I said, culture within our units, a different culture within our society, within the world even.
Be great, wouldn't
that
it?
would be a hope that we're getting back to the deeper values, not the more superficial values. My other hope would be that, and one of the things I love is that even through the streaming of services, and I'm in touch with pastors on a regular basis
all over the country
through my mentoring, and they're doing it tough by and large because everybody's scrambling to know how to do services and how to keep contact with people. But one of the things that people are saying to me is, there's at the very least the silver lining. There's incredible stuff coming out of it. Like one church I heard had 30 overt conversions to follow Jesus over the Easter weekend because of their streaming.
And doing church online, and that was the result.
Yes,
Wow.
people whom they
Yeah.
would not normally contact
Wow,
through
yeah.
opening up this new avenue. So I actually believe that not only in the present situation is there the opportunity for hope, but also that God is actually bringing this world to his loving, gracious conclusion.
Yeah.
And I look forward to that.
Yeah, I think we all look forward to that. So thank you, Keith, for being with us today. Thank you for sharing that message around how righteousness really helps us step into that good life, that right relationship with God. And we look forward to you joining us as we continue this series over the next couple of weeks, and we'll catch up with you then. Thanks.